collection of organizations that none of us could do alone. And I think being a part of that team and being able to leverage the value of that partnership is really important to being able to accomplish these goals.
Got it. Thank you. I appreciate that. And I've expanded that to its own, or I will, if it's okay with you guys, which really takes us now to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
Do you want to have something called medical application?
I only put isotopes, but we can expand that to medical.
Yeah, add to it, actually.
Already there are nuclear medicine.
Well,
No.
if you're going to add medical, can you eliminate space? Because it's space, medical, and industrial. I mean, isotopes are used,
No, there is a reason I'm saying that. There is another area we could possibly engage in, and that's imaging construction for diagnostic and therapy. These are very major issues because, the CTs are used every day, and the amount of dose that people get is enormous. Something like 27 times our average dose that every individual gets in the United States in one examination. So if we can improve the imaging process and therefore reduce the radioactivity that people are exposed to, that's a major issue. That's why some would say we have a category that includes for diagnosis.
Well, I think all of these things sort of show what we're talking about. And, Sammy did a really great job of talking about things like journalist workshops, policymaker workshops. We have found you establish these with entities and organizations that have respect, and the organization's representatives will come, and then you can really have an opportunity to engage them on dialogue related to the issues that are important, because you often find that they're just not as informed as they might otherwise believe they are. And it gives you really a chance to talk about what nuclear science technology really is and the value of it. So these kinds of things all roll up inside there when we talking about a value proposition. We talked once about having the 30-second elevator speech, Jerry, as you'll recall. And while we can still do that, the fact is whatever information we're providing over to those individuals that otherwise would be candidates for the consortium board, we need to show them that there's a return on investment and a benefit, if you will, from the value proposition of what it does not only for their entity and organization, but what it does for the larger entity of nuclear science technology. Because each one are going to approach it a little different, obviously. Please.
The other possibility, you bring in the medical aspect, it may change the complexion of your target list in terms of adding to that particular platform. Obviously, major global brand names that are involved in medical device technology, imaging, all of those areas. And some of them also happen to be in the nuclear reactor business as well. So one potential advantage, I'm not arguing for this one way or another, if you do expand, at least conceptually, the target list of people that could have an interest, could bring their own gravitas to the table, as well as perhaps some funding support. Just an observation. I'm not.
That's very important, because actually, as a community, American Nuclear Society, we are very close.
Well,
we don't bring others in.
the other piece of this, and I'll just read from, I don't know who wrote this for Aruba.
That was basically Mike. Mike told that to Maureen. That was
Maureen mentioned, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Actually, they're making a statement, communication/education efforts needed to address lingering fears, which were there.
Yes.
Many would argue rightfully so. So to the extent that nuclear science, the nuclear solution is viewed in a very different light, that could be helpful. And not from a political standpoint, but from the standpoint of education, communication to the public at large.
Yes, that's a critical issue for us, actually.
Yeah.
Communication and
Right.
explaining.
Well,
and
we're sitting here
engaging.
talking about extending to 80 years.
Yeah,
the life of
yeah,
the
yeah,
reactor.
yeah.
Well, I mean, that is, yeah, I think that's one of the key overall goals of the consortium. To
Yes.
actually become like a clearinghouse or whatever you want to call it, to actually channel that information in a way that is effective.
If I may add to the discussion, Professor Jamal White, who is the director for Center for Molecular Imaging, we are actually planning a one-day workshop on the medical isotope imaging and all those aspects, which was actually programmed to be April, but it got pushed to next month, I think. So that will involve a lot of the universities that are working in this area, including the experts in imaging aspects. So that's scheduled to happen in the next month or two. And we are expecting to have I think kind of a white paper. Our goal is at the time of our workshop on ADS and Turing workshop and all these aspects. So that feeds into what Sam is saying here. It's already been planned. The work is in progress in that.
And when you really stop and think about all the things we're talking about, what does that do for any entity or organization working in nuclear science technology? What's the value proposition? We suddenly have an organized, standardized, state-sponsored entity or organization which has the capability to speak out on all the policy issues and the technical issues that are relevant and important to this entity and organization conducting business, no matter where it's conducting it, whether it's a lab or a university or a utility. Nuclear science technology is now being promulgated and spoken about in higher circles, both in policy in the state, policy on the national level, and the state becomes, if you will, a leader in the national activities related to policy influence and policy modification. And I think that's what, if I'm the head of one of these organizations that we've listed, I want that. I want to have an entity, an organization. I want to have a chance to help influence that. So I would like to have a seat at the table on this consortium board. And I imagine a lot of organizations will see it that way too. Otherwise, somebody else is controlling their destiny. And I imagine that's not something most of these folks want to have happen.
So let me ask you another question, David. I mentioned about emergency response. Do you think that's an issue?
Well, I don't know that that's an issue. I think the nuclear industry and NEI, the trade association, working in cooperation with INFO, have addressed this to a very large extent. And the severe accident management processes that are in place, the flex strategy, are reasonably well defined, including the regional emergency response supply centers. I'm not sure I see that as a focus item where you can make. I think we're pretty well covered.
No, I'm really more looking at a different aspect of it, and that's really engagement of public. Because that's, you see what I'm saying, is more fundamental engagement of public in understanding what it is and appreciating what they need to do and how they act in the case of emergency.
I think in that case, it's more of a single facet of a broader communication with the public. You may or may not be aware, but we do communicate annually with everyone within a 10-mile radius of our facilities and make sure that people are trained and we run exercises. So I would say, rather than be a standalone focus item, I would see emergency preparedness as one aspect of the broader communication scheme.
Yeah, I think David's right on this. I mean, I would see this group as, that if there's emergency response, activity already going on, or, activities in place, that this would, promote the good things that they are doing. So, that if there is an emergency, yes, they've got it under control. This is part of the press, communication side of it.
I have some ideas, but I think.
Okay.
Well, and I think some of those are probably better shared with the consortium board for them to conduct. I think it's the authority, our responsibility is to set the higher level thresholds for what are important activities, policy issues we think need to be addressed, to pass that down. If you look at the letter we sent to them, we were pretty clear what we would retain and what they would have. So some of that stuff, like you're saying, while important nonetheless, would probably be conducted by the consortium if necessary to be addressed with Nuclear Energy Institute or the other entities participating with them. Probably that would not be an authority activity. But I think from the standpoint of what we need to do before we leave here today is to come up with a general consensus, if you will, about what a value proposition looks like, the 9, 10, 11, 12 elements or so, then structure that, because some of that is part of the benefits that an entity would get to being on it. And then when you identify founding board members, and then we need to go and aggressively pursue and recruit them to get engaged, so we have them engaged before the end of the summer. So we're starting on this activity. Agreed, Randy?
Agreed, yeah.
And I think that's the part of what this recruitment committee was to do, was to establish those overarching kinds of benefits and returns on investments, and then to identify the individuals to go after and do so.
May I say one more thing? How about, we didn't say anything about nuclear waste. I call it actually used nuclear fuel, but that's important. That's something that at least we may not think technically is an issue, but truly is an issue.
It's a policy.
Is a policy, is a public.
We need to talk about that. I have some ideas. We need to explore.
We can certainly include it underneath the policy kinds of issues that are important for the consortium board to address. I mean, waste is a national issue, not just a state issue, although he has some state issues he has to deal with the Dominion, so I'm sure we can list that. And I imagine once we get this started, we'll find there are others that we just haven't identified yet that are, some of them will become relevant as the timing, because sometimes the windows of opportunity open up for certain issues to be addressed.
I would assume the consortium will start, we have to have a priority list, and we cannot do everything.
Well,
And that'll be up to the consortium board, whoever decides.
We'll give them some influence, but the reality is, one of the things I wrote down with yours and permission is this thing about nuclear power plants being assets. It's foolish for us to continue to permit our nuclear power plants that cost, took 6 to 8 years to design, license, put into operation at a cost of hundreds of millions of dollars, and that would be more like 10 years today at billions of dollars, to allow them to be shut down simply because they're not economically competitive in the geographical location which they're currently operating. And to find some mechanism whereby we can provide a relief, if you will, I don't want to call it subsidy, but something that goes on that allows the plant to continue to be operated until it can be economically competitive. So we have some traction in
But
U.S.
that's
Congress
also
on that.
an issue of energy policy or lack of energy policy.
It is, and I don't know if there comes
Seriously.
a time
Yeah.
that the discussion gets elevated to the point where we put nuclear in the context of other forms of electric power. In other words, the public is I would say, a weak understanding that there's no free lunch. Solar is good in many respects, but 10 times the depth per terawatt hour is nuclear, and if you change the reflectivity of the earth, you change its temperature. Wind limitations as well. Eventually, with enough wind, you change climate airflow patterns, micrometeorology, macrometeorology changes. We see the same thing with nuclear. Nuclear has problems with waste, coal has problems with CO2. There is no free lunch, and at some point in time, we need to elevate that dialogue to where the public understanding of the relative benefits and drawbacks of each form of power generation. I don't know if that is a new consortium or not.
I think that's a very important issue, because as a community, we really have to engage in this discussion.
With another entity that can do it. Right now, the ANS is doing it on a smaller part and trying to get more and more organizations involved, talking about the fact that nuclear produces 63% of the non-carbon producing energy in this country, and acknowledging and recognizing the vast majority of our lawmakers and policymakers speak of our renewables like this, wind, solar, and nuclear, which